Okay, let's dive right in. If you've been following AI at all, you know things are just moving incredibly fast.
Absolutely. And one area that's really accelerating, especially inside companies, is autonomous AI agents.
Right. These aren't just simple chatbots anymore.
No, not at all. Think of them more like systems designed to actually achieve goals, complete tasks. And they do this by interacting with, well, all sorts of digital systems within an enterprise.
And that interaction, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've been looking at some source material, specifically a demo presentation. It was about a tool called Solo.io's Agent Gateway.
Yeah, and our goal here in this deep dive is to really unpack let's see, the practical challenges that come up when companies start using these agentic architectures.
The risks involved too.
Definitely the risks. And crucially, how something like this agent gateway, this specialized tool shown in the demo, tries to provide the necessary guardrails, security, visibility, control.
So we're going to try and pull out the key insights, the really important nuggets from this material for you, just so you can quickly get a handle on what's significant here.
We'll guide you through the main points from the demo, basically. Trying to highlight not just what they showed, but why it actually matters if you're working with or even just thinking about using AI agents in your company.
Okay, so first things first.
Mhm.
Based on the material, what exactly are we talking about when we say AI agents in this enterprise context?
Well, at its core, it's an autonomous system. It's built to achieve some specific goal or objective.
Autonomous meaning it figures things out itself.
Pretty much, yeah. Instead of needing step-by-step instructions for every single little action, it's designed to determine the necessary steps on its own to reach whatever goal it's been given.
Okay. And how do they operate? How do they get things done? The material mentioned a few communication paths.
Right. So obviously, they talk to the AI models, the large language models, the LLMs that are powering them. That's the intelligence bit.
Makes sense.
They might also talk to other agents. You could have, networks of these things collaborating.
Oh, interesting.
But a really key interaction, and one the demo focused on, is how they talked to backend APIs. The demo called these tools.
Tools within the enterprise, so like existing business systems.
Exactly. This is how they actually do things, access data, trigger actions, manipulate things in your existing IT landscape.
Okay, but wait. Interacting with back-end APIs doesn't sound completely new. Your microservices do that, right?
Yeah.
Traditional apps do that. So what's the big deal? What's the new problem AI agents bring?
That's the crucial difference. It's their non-deterministic nature. That's the core challenge.
Non-deterministic, meaning,
Meaning unpredictable, essentially. With a normal API call, you send a request, you generally know exactly what you'll get back. It follows the code. Predictable.
okay,
Agents, though, driven by these complex LLMs making decisions, well, they're inherently less predictable. They might choose a weird sequence of actions or call APIs in an order you didn't expect, all to try and reach their goal.
that unpredictability,
Mhm.
that's the key then, isn't it?
It really is.
Because that immediately creates issues that, like, our standard security tools aren't really built for.
Exactly. The demo highlighted this leads to new security vulnerabilities. And that's something, leaders are quite worried about.
I bet.
You also lose the kind of built-in observability you might get with traditional API traffic. And frankly, your existing compliance rules, your governance procedures, they don't map easily onto these fluid autonomous interactions.
Things are happening, but it's
Yeah.
harder to see, harder to control, harder to secure.
Precisely. Now, the material did mention some emerging protocols designed for this stuff, things like MCP, the Model Context Protocol, and A2A for agent-to-agent communication.
Okay, so there are new ways for them to talk.
Yes, these protocols provide a structure for how agents, models, and these tools can communicate.
And this seemed like the absolute crux of the issue in the demo. These new protocols, MCP, ATOA, they don't actually include things like enterprise-grade security or observability or guardrails natively.
That's the critical gap they pointed out. The protocols define the communication, but not the security wrapper around it.
So that's the vulnerability right there, if
Yeah.
you're starting to use AI agents talking to your internal systems.
The communication path itself, using these new protocols, it just lacks the built-in security and control you'd normally demand in an enterprise setup. It's a gap that needs plugging.
Okay, so how do you plug it? This brings us neatly to the solution proposed in the demo, Solo.io's Agent Gateway.
Right. This is pitched as a new open source project from Solo.io. And it's built specifically to tackle this challenge, securing and managing all that agent communication.
And its relevance comes from the fact that it understands these new protocols. It speaks MCP and A2A.
Exactly. Because it understands the protocols, it can actually sit in the middle of the communication flow.
Like a proxy.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It sits between, say, an agent and a tool, or an agent and an LLM, or even agent to agent. And because it's in the path and understands the conversation.
It can enforce rules.
Right. It can enforce security policies. It can collect metrics for observability. It can handle tracing, apply governance rules, all that important enterprise stuff.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. How does it actually work? What did the demo show?
Well, first, it acts as a single central endpoint. Instead of agents needing to know about, dozens of different backend MCP servers exposing tools,
They just talk to the gateway.
they just talk to the gateway. And the gateway figures out the routing, applies the policies, and then forwards the request if it's allowed.
Configuration looked fairly straightforward in the demo. They used JSON.
Yeah, JSON for the example, which is handy. But they also mentioned it supports XDS.
Ah, XDS. That's the standard config API used in things like Istio and Envoy, right? For service mesh.
Exactly. So it fits into that cloud-native ecosystem.
They also mentioned it's built in Rust. Why Rust?
Performance and resource efficiency, mainly. Agents might not be like high-frequency trading systems needing nanosecond responses, but
If you have lots of them, performance still matters.
it does. Resource usage matters. So Rust is a good choice for building efficient, reliable infrastructure like this. It's sort of a modern C++ way, but safer.
Got it. And the proxying side looked quite flexible. It can obviously proxy those back-end MCP servers exposing tools.
Yes, that's its primary job. But the bit that really caught my eye, actually,
What's that?
it can also proxy traditional REST APIs.
Really? How?
Using an open API spec, the standard way to describe a REST API, you give the gateway the open API definition for your existing API.
Like the pet store example they use.
Exactly like the pet store example. And the gateway can then expose that old REST API to new MCP clients, like AI agents. It does the protocol translation automatically.
Wow. Okay, that's actually quite powerful.
It really is.
It means your new AI agents aren't stuck only talking to brand new AI native services. They can securely tap into your existing stuff too through the gateway.
Precisely. It bridges that gap. And naturally, the demo spent a good chunk of time showing the security enforcement. That's clearly a huge focus.
Right. They showed authentication first, making the gateway demand a JWT token.
Yeah, a standard JWT token in the request header if the token wasn't there or wasn't valid.
Connection rejected. Simple as that.
Yep. But then they went further, showing authorization and policy even with a valid token.
Ah, this was the echo versus add tool example.
That's the one. They set up a policy on the gateway saying, okay, this client, even though it's authenticated, is only allowed to use the echo tool. Access to the add tool was explicitly denied by the policy.
So even with the right credential.
Even with the valid token, when the agent tried to use the add tool, the gateway blocked it based on the policy. But when it tried the echo tool,
It worked fine.
It worked fine, which really demonstrates that fine-grained control. It's not just about who can connect, but what specific actions or tools they're allowed to access via the gateway.
That level of control seems essential for these unpredictable agents.
Absolutely critical. And beyond the security, they circled back to observability, because all this communication is flowing through the gateway.
You can collect data.
Exactly. You get metrics, you get tracing data for all these interactions, agent to LLM, agent to agent, agent to tool. It gives you that much-needed visibility into what these autonomous systems are actually up to.
Which you wouldn't get if they were just talking directly using MCP or A2A.
Correct. And they briefly touched on governance, too, mentioning a broader concept they called an agent mesh.
Agent mesh, what's that involve?
Well, it includes things like maybe a registration portal. So before a new agent or maybe a new tool it wants to access is allowed onto the network via the gateway, it might have to go through some kind of approval workflow. Adds another layer of control.
Makes sense. And finally, they emphasize the open source aspect.
Yes, the agent gateway itself is an open source project. They also mentioned related projects like K-Agent.
Which is already in the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Right, alongside Kubernetes and other big projects. And K-Gateway, which seems to be the umbrella project, also in the CNCF. So they're positioning this within that established open source cloud ecosystem. More details are on the solo.io site and GitHub, obviously.
Okay, so pulling it all together then, the core insight, the main takeaway from digging into this material seems to be this. Enterprises are excited about AI agents, but
But the underlying protocols these agents use, these new MCP and A2A protocols, they don't just magically come with the security, the observability, the governance that enterprises absolutely need.
there's a gap.
There's a definite gap, and tools like this agent gateway are being presented as, well, essential infrastructure to fill that gap, to bring that necessary enterprise-grade control and visibility to these powerful but potentially quite unpredictable agentic systems.
Right. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering how this gateway can bridge the gap, how it can expose your existing traditional APIs to these new AI agents using their own protocols, what kind of really powerful, maybe even unexpected autonomous workflows or integrations could you build in your organization? Think about connecting your current systems to these smart agents, but doing it safely, securely through this kind of controlled gateway. What possibilities does that open up for you?